Can I tell you a joke I came up with?
Is it quick?
Yeah, I can make it quick.
To begin, this is like my first video, and to really put into perspective how poorly written this movie is, I want y'all to know I've been making commentaries on movies like years before this, and never once did I ever actually pull out my computer and make a video review on it, you know? I know that this movie came out like a year ago, and I know it did its rounds then, and everybody knows it's bad, but I kind of just got here, and I want my turn. I just can't stop thinking about how terrible this movie was. And the thing is, I actually wrote this script back when it first came out like a year ago. But then life happened, and you know, school happened, and now since I got a break, I feel like it's really time to give it its true course, you know what I mean? So with that out the way, here's why I don't think that you're wrong for not liking Joker Folie. I'm realizing now that most people don't remember the first movie or, you know, even really care about these movies like I do, so I'll give you all a refresher. This dude's name is Arthur, and he's like skinny and a loser, and everybody treats him terribly. He's got a terrible job, lives in a terrible city, and has a terrible disease that makes him laugh whenever he's uncomfortable. And what's more, he writes terrible jokes, so honestly, it really couldn't get worse than that.
You know, I was just thinking the other day.
Along his magical journey, in what can be easily described as hell, he gets jumped in a dirty subway by some evil finance bros until he summons his inner John Wick and walks all three of them down with his trusty revolver. This significant action of finally taking control in his otherwise chaotic and terrible life empowers Arthur to take control in other aspects of his life, like asking his neighbor, who is the sexiest woman to ever be put on screen, to go on a date with him, and they fall in love and get married. Then things, of course, inevitably go wrong for Arthur. He learns that he's probably Batman's brother, and that he contracted ligma as a baby, and so he does the only thing that makes any sense, and kills his mom. Oh, and that perfect life and the picket fence with that lady from earlier, yeah, that was all in his mind. That never happened. So anyway, the movie begins its last act with Arthur getting invited on Steve Harvey to tell some jokes for some reason, except he shows up wearing clown makeup because everybody likes the idea of a dude in a clown costume killing the finance bros from earlier. So he goes on TV and he tells some more belly busters before he one-pumps Steve Harvey on live television. So yeah. Arthur gets arrested, of course, which leads the city to go on a riot between the cops and the clowns, which inevitably kills Batman's parents. And Joker goes to Arkham, which leads to one of my favorite endings in a movie ever. And I'll get back to that in a second. But yeah, that's Joker 1. So now that that's all done, let's see how the sequel completely shits on everything that made the original good. Before I begin my rant, I think it actually might be pretty helpful for me to talk about all the things that I did like. But let's see, I like the performances and the music. That's basically it. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, I think everyone in every theme that is on screen is actually doing a really great job. In fact, I think that everything that isn't related to, you know, putting a pen to paper and writing the screenplay is just really fantastic, honestly. We don't get to see much of Gotham in this movie, but we did get to see, I think for the first time on screen, an in-depth look into what Arkham is like and how it reflects Gotham as a whole. The impressive distortion of saturation and black point in the Arkham scenes not only gives us a purview into how nasty the facility is, but additionally it strengthens the B-plot of the film, which was to create the necessity for Arthur to seek better rehabilitation in a better facility. Because I mean, just look around for like 5 seconds. You're not helping anybody in here! Not only does it strengthen the B-plot, but it actually makes the musical scenes that much more tantalizing. I don't even have to get into the specifics of color theory to explain to you that showing us scenes of gray, bland, ugly-ass Arkham juxtaposed perfectly with Arthur's retreats into fantasy and sort of justify why Arthur would need to retreat in the first place. In my opinion, they're perfectly set across the movie to where your mind is like right on the cusp of begging the movie for just a little bit of color, and then bam, you get hit with like a chromacopia of colors sat on top of a dark background, and it like kind of satisfies your mind before the cycle like starts again. Regarding the characters and the performances, honestly, Phoenix is just as compelling as he was in the first movie. And oftentimes, especially in his dialogue with Mr. Puddle or his return to Arkham as he led his council, I felt completely immersed in the movie of the world. And I kind of sort of forgot that I was even, you know, just watching a movie. One of my favorite performances in this movie was, interestingly, Harry Lotley as Harvey Dent, who really like summoned this presence of a pretentious lawyer or whatever almost perfectly, which made the scene of Arthur mocking him that much funnier. Lady Gaga, of course, was excellent as usual, but I really wish that the writers gave her some more to do, because from what I remember, she only has like 10 speaking lines the whole movie, and then the rest of her is just singing, which makes it seem like the casting directors really only casted her because, well, she knows how to sing, which is, I don't know, that was pretty disappointing. And speaking of the songs, if I ignore the musical aspect of the movie and just listen to them as songs, I mean, I gotta be honest, some of these songs were really great. In fact, on the way home, while I was thinking of what a mess this movie's story was, I was still bumping the soundtrack to this movie because all of the songs sounded great. Not even sure if Phoenix has sung in any of his other performances, but hearing his like delicate but like really passionate voice as Arthur sing For Once in My Life and If You Go Away really convinced me that this dude is a really great actor. Lady Gaga, of course, is a professional vocal performer, and like I mentioned before, most of her lines were singing lines, so it was no surprise that she literally rips the scene away from Arthur every single time she gets to sing. But that's where we get into the, the stuff that really annoyed me. Basically everything else. I like to preface this by saying that I don't even think that the plot was even as bad as it was just disappointing, man. You know what I mean? Although I definitely think that the plot was, pretty freaking bad. My disappointment comes from how there were just so many missed opportunities in this movie that it failed to do the one thing that every sequel should do. It didn't justify itself. I don't think I'm the only person who thought when they heard there was going to be a sequel.
Don't you dare.
Because the first movie, to many people, including myself, seemed like a masterclass in storytelling, subversion of tropes, nuance, and probably the most significant of all of these, it relayed a message to the public. When I've got all of these things and a satisfying but, appropriately confusing conclusion, I don't really want to find out what's next for Joker and his pals because I know nothing else is going to give me something as interesting or as tightly crafted as the first movie. But, when I heard that this movie was going to be a musical, I was absolutely down to clown with an exciting new sequel. You see what I did there? And I know that when it was announced that it was a musical, most people weren't into it, but personally, I thought that that was probably the boldest and most creative choice this movie could have chosen. When Arthur kills the guys on the train, what's the first thing he does? He dances. When he suits up his Joker for the first time, what's the first thing he does? He dances. When he comes out on Murray's show, what's the first thing he does? He dances. In fact, Murray makes even a comment about it being unorthodox. So if we're gonna see a sequel that delves even further into Arthur's psyche, I think making part of the film about that significant part of his personality is a pretty brilliant choice, honestly. But there is a caveat. If that was the route that they chose, then this can't be just a regular musical. The only way this style would have worked, for me at least, and been interesting, is if they subverted the genre in a way that services the narrative. But they didn't, and that's why this movie failed. Here's what I mean. When Arthur breaks out into song, and then 5 seconds later the movie tells me it didn't actually happen, nothing about the narrative really changes. And wouldn't you know it, every single one of Arthur's song sequences is literally just that. And the reason why these scenes become such of a letdown is because they're just surface value, and only express surface value level aspects of Arthur's character. Arthur is happy. Arthur is excited. Arthur is uncomfortable. Arthur really wants to get out of this situation, and that's all that it is. There's no depth to any of them. In fact, if you completely remove all of the songs, nothing about the plot changes because they only fill up the runtime of the movie. I also kind of hated that, like the songs, the movie chose to abandon all the nuance of the first movie and just tell you everything instead of show you. I'm gonna be honest, most of that has to do with Harley's character. From the moment you meet Harley, you learn that she really could care less about Arthur, and she only really cares about his Joker persona. And the movie tells you this in literally every single scene she's with them. But why? Think about it. Narratively, it makes no sense for the movie to tell us that Harley doesn't really care about Arthur as soon as we meet her, because when we get that scene on the stairs of Arthur asking her to leave with him, we as an audience already know she doesn't want him no more. That's bad writing. Now, I don't like to say that I could do things better because I don't freaking write movies, but when I see scenes that could be fixed so effortlessly, I wonder why they didn't just choose to do it that way. Instead, why don't they just subtly tell us that Harley isn't to be trusted? For example, look at this. Instead of her saying,
I want to see the real you,
and then putting on his makeup when they're fucking in the cell, why don't the writers just have her put on the makeup instead? Just have her do that. Instead of the lawyer telling Arthur, Harley isn't who she says immediately, cut that shit out the story, and then when Harley and him have the talk in Arkham, Arthur might catch her in a lie. Or better yet, have her butter him up in the confessional saying she cares about him, and then do that amazing shot of him matching his smile to the lipstick, subtly showing that she isn't telling the whole truth. Instead of her leaving the courtroom after Arthur says,
There is no Joker.
telling the audience that she's not to be trusted, maybe have her stay in the courtroom, and then when the bomb goes off and Arthur escapes and maybe he catches up to Harley after all the chaos, then she says,
We're not going away, Arthur.
and then maybe show a quiet montage of all the subtle things that she did, like doing the makeup and drawing the lipstick, or etc. Like in the last movie when we learned that Sophie wasn't really there. And then as she walks away, just to let it really hit the audience that nobody really cared about Arthur. They just cared about the persona. Because I'm not dense, I understood what they were trying to illustrate. They were trying to say that often society makes a martyr out of a person for a cause without really taking the time to recognize that there's an actual human being underneath. But by making those aspects of Harley's untrustworthy character subtle, instead of right in your freaking face, it gives the audience a moment to really take in that theme and process it in a more meaningful way. But no, I guess they just forgot how they wrote the first freaking movie. And even beyond like the quality of the writing, the plot is also really freaking inconsistent, specifically with the split personality dilemma. When I saw the cartoon short at the beginning of the story, I was thinking to myself, I don't think this movie is going to be as bad as everybody says it is. But no, I was definitely wrong. I thought the idea of making Joker a split personality from Arthur was really freaking cool, and I don't think I've even read a story where they even tried that with a character. But when Arthur says at the end that there is no Joker, all I kept thinking was, no, that's not true at all. And at first I thought that was kind of the point, but no, I was also freaking wrong. Because the film goes through lengths to show that there is a distinct personality difference between when Arthur's Arthur and when Arthur's Joker. Of course, I know that dissociative identity disorder doesn't actually work like that, but the simplest way to convey it in this movie would be to show a shift in character when he's in either, personality. When he's Arthur, you can see in his mannerisms. He's much more mellow, he slouches and isolates himself. Doesn't even tell any fucking jokes. He actually goes out of his way to not tell any jokes. But as Joker, you can see he's much more sure of himself. He stands straight, he's boisterous and erratic, and he draws attention to himself and seeks said attention as well. He even tells the best fucking joke in the movie as Joker.
Let me tell you one I used to do about my mother. You can drop the act now, because we know it's only Arthur in there, okay?
And she only dated abusive guys.
Yeah, is that right?
And I asked her, I said, Mom, why do you stay with your abusive boyfriend? And she said, beats the hell out of me!
There's a reason that when he escapes to his fantasies, he's not his regular self. He's wearing the makeup and a suit. And another issue is I didn't really understand why Harley and his cult following were upset that he claimed that there was no Joker. Because logically, it would make more sense for them to not want there to be two personalities and only the one. If Arthur really did have two personalities, wouldn't that mean that their leader is carrying around this weak and much more mellow than his energetic counterpart? But if it's just the one, that means that Arthur is the only personality, but that, Arthur is still technically the Joker because he's the one who killed all those people. Harley doesn't lose her crush, and his following doesn't lose their following because he denies having separate personalities. It just means that he's taking accountability for his actions instead of pawning it off to the fake personality. And it's not like they don't want him to take accountability for his actions. They just want to be as anarchist as possible. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm not making sense, but it made sense in my head when I was writing this, so I don't know. And of course I have to talk about this lazy attempt at connecting this to a greater universe. I mean, personally, I don't even really care if they were trying to make this connection to Heath Ledger's Joker, or if it was just an homage to it, because I know for a fact that this is definitely not Heath's Joker. I mean, Heath's Joker wasn't even really psychopathic, he was just more sociopathic, technically. And additionally, it doesn't even matter anyway, because there's definitely not going to be a Joker 3. But my only issue with it is, it's just so lazily written. Instead of this random guy that we've seen like twice the whole freaking movie being the one who stabs Arthur, why not just use the guy who's been hovering over Arthur the whole freaking movie? It would have made sense too, because then we could assume that the kid stabbed him because he kind of liked Arthur and looked up to him, but thought he let him down. But this time it's not a random person who hasn't even had a line in the movie till the very freaking end. It's just so dumb, and honestly, I've been talking for so long that I'm sure you get the point. This movie is just very, very poorly crafted. I'm gonna conclude this by telling you about this one line in the first movie that I think perfectly encapsulates why this whole freaking movie is wrong. After the events of the first movie pass, we learn that Arthur has now wound up in Arkham. How did he get there? When did he get there? Because the last time we saw him, he was doing this in front of a crowd. We don't know. And this confusion to the audience is perfect because it's setting up the punchline. Arthur is speaking to this new psychiatrist, and as she counsels him, she asks why he's laughing. Arthur just smirks and looks at her and says, and after years of reviews and critics and people trying to dive into what that line meant, it's generally considered that this line is meant to show that it's possible that the events of the movie never even happened at all, or if they did happen, they definitely didn't happen the way that the movie told you to. That's the joke. We as an audience sat through the movie and danced with Arthur through a non-linear story told by an unreliable narrator, tiptoeing in between what really was reality, and the movie left it up to our discretion to add up all the nuance, the cinematography, and subtext to tell whether or not we would even get the joke. Could we tell if the events of the movie were real or not? I even remember when there were people dissecting how certain scenes were lit to discern what scenes were real and what scenes were fake. But then fast forward 6 years, and we get this movie, where there's no subtext, little mise-en-scene, and very lackluster tone to create a narrative that failed to outclass or even just match the quality of the first movie. I'm not mad that I didn't have to play hopscotch with the movie again to tell what was real or not. I'm disappointed that they chose to use a concept like a musical to tell this story, and did nothing with it to tell us anything substantial about Arthur's character, and it didn't justify its place as a sequel, and because it didn't justify itself, it feels to me like it overwrote one of the coolest endings I've ever seen in a comic book movie for no reason. All cards on the table, that's why I didn't like this movie. I wasn't watching to see Joker rise to the top of the criminal empire, and I wasn't dissing this movie immediately because I heard it was a musical. I just wanted to see the director's vision get executed into a good-ass movie. I guess the joke's on everyone because, man, I did not love this movie. Dude, I can't believe I finally made this freaking video. This script has been sitting in my computer collecting dust for about a year. I can't believe it took me this long to finally do something. And now that I appreciate everybody for watching this video, because now I have the confidence to make more of these videos. I know that I enjoy making commentary. I've been doing it and annoying all of my friends with my commentary for years. Might as well just make videos on it now. And this gave me enough confidence to just let all of the other scripts collecting dust in my laptop finally see the light and see what other people think. If you don't agree with me or you think I said something wrong, you can, I don't know, bully me on Instagram or something like that. Here's all of my socials to the left. I really do appreciate everybody watching this. I hope everybody's safe, and thank you once again for watching this.